Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. So, a couple of things have happened since the most recent video, my video on how I've been making tongs recently. First of all, you will notice that I have finally figured out my microphone problem. The microphone I got originally just didn't work, essentially, with an iPhone. No amount of adapters or quick fixes could ever probably fix it, so I just went ahead and got a different one. And this one actually works great. So it's been a long time since I have visited the Blacksmithing from Scratch video series, and I wanted to come back to it because I think it's a cool concept and I want to continue doing it. So today I'm going to be showing you guys the recipe that I use for firebricks, because I want to upgrade the forge, and while the mud works fine, it is a temporary solution because it's starting to crack and break. Obviously this won't be an issue if you dig a hole in the ground because it doesn't really have a wall to break off. It'll just be a hole until you fill it in, so that solves that issue pretty quickly. But as you can see, I have a fire brick here, and I've made a little mold out of some pieces of cedar wood. It doesn't matter what kind of wood you use. I just wanted to use cedar. I actually don't know the dimensions of this mold that I made. I just kind of used what I had, and but you know, it makes pretty sizable bricks. The nice thing about this brick formula is that it does not melt even at 3,000 degrees, which is how hot my forge gets. So that is very good because a lot of the times firebricks will only be rated for 2,500 degrees or something like that, whereas this will not melt at all at those temperatures. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get into the materials that you'll be needing. So the materials you need for these firebricks can be found at most local hardware stores. I got all of this from Lowe's. You can also get it from Home Depot for similar prices. We have play sand and Portland cement. Those two are pretty straightforward to find. And then we have vermiculite. You can use vermiculite or perlite. I've used both and they work similarly. I like vermiculite a little bit better because the pieces are smaller, and so they get more, the bricks are more homogeneous. They don't have these big gaps of air in them. And basically the purpose of the vermiculite or perlite is they're very airy materials. Like, they're much lighter than sand is. So as you can see, there's no breeze right now, but even as I'm doing that, some of the vermiculite's blowing away. And basically they create these air pockets in the brick. That's why fire bricks are always pretty light, is because they have a lot of air in them. And the air is actually the insulative material. It is the best kind of insulator for fire bricks. So the purpose of the sand is actually to keep the Portland cement from melting. I've tried it just using these two, and it ends up that at extremely high temperatures, the fire brick begins to melt somewhat. With the addition of the sand, it actually keeps that Portland cement from melting for a much longer time, and it kind of stabilizes the whole brick itself. The portions are 2 parts Portland cement, 1 part vermiculite or perlite, and then 1 part of play sand, and we mix them together and put water in them. Now, when you're mixing it, you don't actually want to make it a slurry. You want to make it more of a clay-ish texture. It's obviously not going to be exactly the same as clay, but similar to that consistency, because you want to be able to set it in the brick, pat it down, and then lift the mold up and still have a solid structure. This is what happens when the brick is too wet. When you do that, you end up having to kind of try and smooth the sides until it dries a little bit more, which is fine. I mean, this brick is going to work just as well as this one. This one just looks a whole lot neater, and it's got, you know, less of this corner part missing and pockets and all kinds of problems. So this is what you want. This is with a less runny mixture. So I've gone ahead and gotten some warm water from inside because it's below freezing, and all of the water in the hoses is frozen, so I can't use them. Got some warm water so that it doesn't freeze out here. And then I've gone ahead and poured all the contents into this bucket. I'm going to stir it up with a drill and something to stir it with. They don't exactly have a stir or anything like that, so I'm gonna have to be creative with what I use. Let's see. I think the other day I used a hammer made for chipping off scale. That worked okay, but it was a little too wide for my liking. So I could use half of a pair of tongs that the other half failed in the past. I think that's what I'm going to try and use. So this is just a tong blank, half of a pair of tongs. I'm just going to put it in my drill and kind of stir the contents dry, and then I'll start adding some water slowly so that I don't get it too saturated, because if I do that I will have to get some more dry ingredients to kind of even it out. So I've gone ahead and stirred the dry materials manually. I am going to use this piece I was using here to stir some water into it. I'm just gonna put a little water into it to start off, about that much. Start stirring it in. Eventually I will have to put on some rubber gloves to stir it by hand, just to make sure all of the contents are saturated. I would not recommend doing this without rubber gloves. I have done it before, certainly, but it definitely does eat up your skin because the lime in the Portland cement is corrosive, and it'll definitely eat up the surface of your skin. So yeah, I would definitely advise doing what they tell you on concrete bags, and that's to use some nice thick rubber gloves. My rubber gloves have holes in them, so it somewhat defeats the purpose, but I'll use them anyway. It protects most of my hands at any rate. So it's very hard to tell. Here, maybe if I tilt it. Here, I'll bring the camera. As you can see, this is starting to get to the point that we want it. At this stage, 1 drop of water goes a very, very long way. So start adding it in much more frugal amounts and stirring, and then we should be able to pour the bricks soon. Now, I may have to add more cement and more of the other dry ingredients, because I don't think this is enough to make a brick. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. Alright, so I've gone ahead and mixed this mixture to what I think is a good texture. And I've got my welding table here. It's a big thick piece of steel. You can do this on pretty much any flat surface. I wouldn't do it onto other bricks, because then they might get fused together. But definitely not a surface that you may be wanting to like use or want to stay nice, for sure. If I were you guys, I would not use a wooden workbench unless you put like a cover over it of some type, maybe a piece of plywood or something like that. But I'm going to go and start to put the cement in. I can use this little spatula-like thing here that I've been using to kind of keep everything in place. The nice thing about this this texture of the mixture is I only got a little bit of it on myself, and I can quickly rinse myself off with some warm water. Yeah, so didn't contact my hands for very long, and it's not going to do anything to me at all. The correct amount of dry materials for my brick mold is about 1.5 times the regular amount that I get for each cup that I use for my portion sizes. So for instance, for the Portland cement, I would do 3 whole cups. For the perlite / vermiculite, and for the play sand, I would just do 1.5 cups of that. And now you want to use something to kind of pat it down to make sure it's in nice and tight in all the corners and everything like that. like you see here. I am going to put on a glove and smooth it with my hand, just so that the surface looks nice when it's done, because I would rather them look somewhat even, like that first one I showed you guys, and not like the other one. So once you're satisfied the brick is good and even on all the surfaces, and you think you've squashed it down so that it gets into all the cracks, what I like to do is sort of wiggle it a little bit before I try and pick it up, like that. And then this one looks pretty good. The thing about these bricks though, they all have these raised four edges when you lift up the mold, just by the nature of the material. With clay bricks, it doesn't do the same thing, because it's not quite as watery a material. So essentially what you do after that is you wait for it to dry. That usually takes a day or so. I leave them overnight in the summer and come back and they're dried. Now that it's really, really cold out, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work, but we will see. And essentially you just rinse and repeat. I have made probably 10 bricks at a time on this table, and let them dry overnight, put them in my forge the next day, and they're fine. I do actually have some fired tiles that I tried to make just by hand, after which point I discovered that they did in fact need to be made with a mold, because I couldn't get them all the same size. But this is the tile, and it held up great. I set it right on top of my forge and it didn't melt at all, which was really nice. Before this I used just a perlite and cement mixture, which works fine again, but it does degrade and melt quicker than this material does. That's actually what's in my forge right now. So yeah, but thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and a comment, and please subscribe and share it with any of your friends, as you guys are the only way that my videos can be discovered by other people. Thanks again, and I hope to see you all in the next one.